Hi, I'm Tom Sult, a medical doctor and functional medicine practitioner, and this is Just Be Well. Today we're talking about a very comprehensive gastrointestinal test. It's called a gut zoomer from Vibrant Wellness Laboratory. And this is part of our ongoing series about how do we figure out how to help you get well. And in this context, we happen to be talking about Lyme disease, but the gut zoomer is a foundational test that we use a lot. So in the case of Lyme disease, Lyme disrupts your gut. The treatment for Lyme disrupts your gut. So many people with Lyme either have a pre-existing issue that made them susceptible to Lyme, or the treatment or the disease itself has disrupted their gut. And the gut is central to getting well. You know, 70% of your immune system lines your gut. If you have chronic inflammation in your gut, it's really inhibiting your immune system's ability to focus on the problem. So let's get started here. So we'll scroll down to the beginning. So first we have sort of the first whole page here, all the way down to here. This is the overview. So diversity. Diversity is key. Diversity of the healthy probiotic bacteria in your gut is key. So we have two indexes, the Shannon index and Simpson index. The goal is to have this one above 2.5 and the Simpson to be above 0.8. So the previous value was 0.9, it's now 1.1, so it's trending in the right direction. And same with this one, it was 4 and now it's 0.6, 0.4 and 0.6, so it's improving. Phyla, this is like, you know, you've heard of phyla, genus, species, right? Well, this is your phyla of bacteria, and here are all the various bacteria in the relative abundance. Notice that there's a ton of firmicutes here, and then the purple here should be, Bacteroides. And then if we look over here, we see these key ratios. So this is this FB. F is this one right here. And if I can highlight it somehow, I guess I'm not very good at this. Okay, there we go. And then the B is Bacteroides right here. So this means something. It has to do with inflammation and things like that in the gut. And the same with this ratio, P to B. So P is way up here, and then the B is the same. It's this one right here. So we're looking at these ratios. You can see that this one was in the red. It's now in the yellow. And our goal is for it to be less than or equal to 0.9. This one we want to be greater than or equal to 0.4. So it's been green all along. We look at commensal bacteria and their relationship to specific disease states. So healthy gut bacteria, that's what commensal means, and its relation to intestinal permeability. Well, the overall sense of it is that it's in the yellow, so you're at risk for intestinal permeability. I mentioned that 70% of your immune system lines your gut, and the immune system gets out of whack, say, when the gut is permeable. What happens is there are things in your gut that are camouflaged to be able to hide in your gut and live in your gut undisturbed by your immune system. But when you become leaky, suddenly those things are easy to see and your immune system starts to attack them. That increases inflammation. It can even lead to autoimmune disease like, you know, arthritis and things like that. So cardiovascular health, again, in the yellow. Metabolic health, things like prediabetes and diabetes in the green, neurological disease in the green, IBD, inflammatory bowel disease, so Crohn's disease and colitis, things like that, in the green, hormone balance in the green. Doesn't mean the hormones are in balance or any of these other things. None of these are diagnostic. What all this means is that the gut microbiome is putting you at risk. Right? So then we go over here, SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth. Well, up against the red. Autoimmune health, pretty deep in the green. Nutrition in the yellow. Liver disease, borderline yellow. And then irritable bowel syndrome in the green. And then there's commentary. You can read this and it tells you things like which probiotics might be good. And then gut pathogens, so bacterial pathogens. These weird looking numbers here, these E stands for exponent. So this is 2.5 times 10 to the 5th. It's just a way of shorthanding large numbers. So a 10 to the 5th is a 1 with 5 zeros after it. So this is 2, 5, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So that's how you would write that out. And this is 7, 5, 0, 0, 0, 0, 4 zeros, and so on. So the reference range is here. So it's 1 times 10 to the 3rd, 3 times 10 to the 2nd, and then this is the previous result. And then the antibiotic resistance genes, only one was found. It was detected both times, which is not too surprising. And then comments again over here tells you something about which broad spectrum herbal treatments might be useful for having these abnormalities. Then we get into the detail. So frankly, everything you need to know is on this first page at a sort of a high altitude level. But now we're going to get our boots dirty. So inflammation and digestive insufficiency. So various markers of digestion and inflammation. So calprotectin is an inflammatory marker. It's actually the most abundant protein in certain kinds of white blood cells, and it is frequently detected in the gut. Basically, it's a marker for, there's probably a lot of white blood cells in the gut, even though they're still at a level that's too small to be seen on a microscope. So the previous value here, the current value, we want it to be less than or equal to 50. It was quite high. It's still high, but improved. And over here, comments tell us something about how to fix it. Pancreatic Elastase 1 is a human enzyme from the pancreas. And if it is low, it tells us that your enzymes from your pancreas are insufficient. That doesn't mean that there's something wrong with your pancreas necessarily. It might mean that you have inflammation in your duodenum, or the first part of your small intestine, that's inhibiting a feedback signal or a signaling molecule called cholecystokinin that tells your pancreas to release enzymes. And so it may just be related to dysbiosis and inflammation and not an injured pancreas. All of these things are same kind of idea. These are various bile acid derivatives. Bile acids, by the way, really important. They're basically soaps. They help break down fats, and they have many other functions as well. Then we look at metabolites. So these acetate, butyrate, propionate, valerate, these are all short-chain fatty acids. So here they are, short-chain fatty acids. And this is the total short-chain fatty acid. We notice that butyrate is low. Butyrate is the most abundant of the short-chain fatty acids, or at least it should be. And it's the most important in terms of an energy source for the inner lining of the intestines called the enterocytes. Beta-glucuronidase is an enzyme that can deconjugate toxins. So basically, in the liver, we conjugate a toxin, put it into the bile duct and out into the intestines to be excreted. But bacteria in the gut with beta-glucuronidase can deconjugate that toxin, and you reabsorb the toxin. So this is important to know about. It's in the normal range. We want it to be less than 2,300, and it's well under that number. Then we look at gut microbiome, intestinal permeability markers. So all of the next several pages are about the microbiome and various issues. So we're really starting to go over that panel of the front page where we saw that there was issues with intestinal permeability, but not with cardiovascular disease and so on. So here we are, and here is that bifidobacterium, which is low, should be greater than 10, and it's 7.9. So it's associated with low short-chain fatty acids, as we see over here. And indeed, we saw that butyrate was low. These are the probiotic levels associated with this. You know, we'd like to have all of these be in a good range. Now, this is small intestine bacterial overgrowth species. And again, we see this stuff is out of our ideal range, and it's a risk factor for small intestine bacterial overgrowth. Cardiovascular health. Here's the cardiovascular health stuff. And we don't see, we do see this one is low. So again, and then the probiotics. And at the bottom of each one, there's some suggestions about which probiotics would be most helpful and which other supplements. And I'll tell you that I used to be a big fan of probiotics, and I still use them, but they're really more of a placeholder. Probiotics generally do not colonize your gut. So what you're really looking for is prebiotics, healthy fibers, and the more diverse, the better. So for diversity, we're really looking at a diverse diet, a diet that is very high in diverse plant matter. All right, then we see autoimmune health here and bifidobacterium. Now, the other thing is this same bug, or many of these same bugs, keep coming up over and over again. So it's not that it's a unique set of bugs for each area. It's that various bugs are associated in different ways to different disease entities. And having bifidobacterium be low does not mean that you have celiac disease. It just means that you're at risk for it based on your microbiome. Now, if you don't have the genetic predisposition for celiac disease, it really doesn't matter what your gut microbiome is, you're not going to get celiac disease. However, if you have celiac disease and you have this bug not sufficient, doing things to make it sufficient will likely make your celiac disease less severe. All right, and again, based on clinical literature, the following prebiotics and supplements may be helpful, and here they are. So here we are on metabolic health. So this is prediabetes, diabetes, that kind of thing. And we see that this was elevated, just mildly, but it was elevated, and now it's normal. And again, if this is elevated, does it mean you have diabetes? Absolutely not. But if you have diabetes and this is elevated, normalizing it may be helpful. All right, nutrition. Here are bugs, and notice there's a lot of bugs here. Now, if these bugs are abnormal, does it mean you are malnourished? No, but it means that you may not be pulling nutrients out of your gut lumen or making nutrients in your gut lumen as efficiently as would be ideal. So as an example, when bifidobacterium is low, you have low production of folate, vitamin K, B1, or B2 and 12, and so on. And down here, a slightly different species of bacteria is suggested to be involved with intestinal digestive insufficiency. And down here, low butyrate production. And then again, based on the clinical literature, here are some recommendations that might be helpful. And these are kind of high-level recommendations. The recommendations that I would prescribe out of this test would probably not resemble this at all. And then neurological disease. So again, if you have this low bifidobacterium, again, this because it was low once, it's going to be low every time, right? Does it mean you have autism? No. But if you have autism and this is low, correcting it may have an impact on some autistic symptoms. And same here, bifidobacterium again in Alzheimer's disease. All right, so, and here are the probiotic species associated with that area, and then the clinical recommendations again. And then we look down here at liver disease. So here are all the bacterium associated with liver disease, and we see that some of them are out of sorts. Now, this one was kind of borderline high before. It's now slightly high. It's associated with alcoholic hepatitis. And then here's another one that's associated with alcoholic hepatitis when it's low. So does this mean the person has alcoholic hepatitis? No. Does it mean I'm going to ask a few questions about alcohol use and maybe draw a liver test? Yeah, probably. Okay, and then the probiotics and the recommendations are there. And then we come down here to IBD, inflammatory bowel disease. So here we have a few things that are abnormal. They're both low, and one is associated with irritable bowel, or excuse me, inflammatory bowel disease in general, and the other is associated with Crohn's disease. But again, doesn't mean you have Crohn's. It means that if you do have Crohn's, if we fix that, the Crohn's might improve. All right. And then the recommendations based on the clinical literature. Then we come down here, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. So a couple of issues here, and the same statement applies. If you have IBS, fixing this may help. This doesn't mean you have that. It's just that if it's abnormal and you have the disease, it may be helpful to fix it. Hormones. Here's two bacteria that produce this stuff called beta-glucuronidase that we talked about earlier about how it deconjugates. Well, conjugation is one of the ways that you detoxify excess estrogens. And so if those were abnormal, it may suggest that you don't process your estrogen ideally. The next page, gut pathogens. So we already saw on the first page the summary of the pathogens. And remember that I talked about that E means exponent. So here's the Clostridial difficile toxin A. Here's this unpronounceable mouthful here, right? And they are present. And so what we may want to do is specifically go after those with some targeted therapy to get rid of those pathogens. We looked at all of these pathogens. We didn't find any of those. We looked at all of these pathogens. Didn't find any of these. Some of these are viruses, by the way, like Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus. And then fungi. We look at several fungi species. Now, if we found a bunch of fungi, we may want to do other testing for that. We may want to do a mold toxin panel as an example. But in this case, we're not seeing anything. So it may not be just based on the testing alone. There may be other historical physical exam reasons why we wanted to do additional tests. And then worms. So these are parasites, worms, and we didn't find any of those. Antibiotic resistance genes. We already talked about that this was found positive because it was on that first page, right? But we looked at all these others. So if you had this one as an example, this one means that the bug involved would be resistant to penicillin-like things. This one, it would mean the bug would be resistant to erythromycin kinds of things, and this one to cipro kinds of things. And then, of course, vancomycin. And then calprotectin, that was one of the inflammatory markers we already saw on the front page, and the pancreatic elastase and all these bile acid conjugates we talked about, the short chain fatty acids we already talked about. And then the risks and limitations. No test is perfect. You can have false negatives and false positives. Any test always has to be interpreted in terms of the medical history and so forth. So just because you have an abnormality on this test, certainly if you have a bug that's either too high or too low, it doesn't mean you have the disease associated with it. But what it does suggest is if you have that disease, fixing it may make that disease better. And again, the gut is at the center of your health. 70% of your immune system lines your gut. If you are, say, in fight or flight, you're going to shut blood away from your gut, so you're not going to have adequate circulation. You're going to not digest well. You're not going to absorb well. You're going to leave fermentable product behind, so you're going to alter your microbiome. And the microbiome, as we've just discussed, is critical for all those areas of health. Plus, 70% of your immune system lines your gut, so you're going to be shunting blood away from your immune system. So the gut is really central here, really important for your health. And one of the things that we often have to dig into in order to figure out why you're the one with chronic Lyme disease. Okay, we'll talk to you on the next video.